Join us as we dive into the history, hauntings, and high strangeness of the world to try to better understand the paranormal. I will be your guide. I am paranormal researcher and investigator Eric Freeman Sims. Welcome to the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you for all the longtime listeners for continuing to support the show. And we have quite a few new listeners here lately who are following the Facebook page and have joined the Facebook group. So thank y'all for tuning in. Hopefully y'all go back and listen to the older episodes and enjoy the show. And y'all seem to like the throwback Thursday episode I did last week with the very first episode of the show. So next week we'll be doing episode 2. Since it's not available online anymore, we'll put it back out there and y'all can listen to it. A lot of y'all reached out and wanted to know the origins of the show because you kind of jumped in, maybe a little later where the shows aren't available anymore. So you'll start putting those out a couple times a month as they drop off, and people can get caught up with the early shows. I'm so glad I've grown as an interviewer and as a podcaster, but thank y'all for allowing me to do this. Thank you for tuning in. Today we have a great guest. Before we get to that, I'm not going to do a big long rant today about mental health, but I just want to tell you, when you feel like you're alone in the world, you're really not. There are lots of us out here who do care about you, that do understand you. And sometimes you can kind of get in your own head and get that stupid self-pity bullshit, pity party of one bullshit that, you feel so alone, but I guarantee you're not. And please, if you need help, reach out to somebody and there are always people out here for you that will just talk to you or just listen. And just know that you're not alone and that you're worth it and that it's worth you getting up every day. And there are people out in this world that love you. And just have a good day today and take the attitude that today is going to be my day and it's going to be good. And so anyway, let's get to Miss Gemma Jade, of course, a returning guest for all of y'all who's listened to the show a long time. If not, go back and listen to the other episodes. We usually talk to her about missing person stuff. But she has a new book series out called Gone, Mysterious Disappearances. Volume 1 and 2 are out now. She's going to bring out Volume 3 here very soon. And some really crazy stories about how people just up and vanish and how the paranormal may play into some of those. So without further ado, y'all sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode with Gemma Jade. We'll see you next time. Have a good day. Stay safe out there. Hey, Gemma, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
It's always a pleasure to have you on. I love our conversations and your books. You have a new series of books out called Gone, Mysterious Disappearances, and you have Volume 1 and 2 out now. And you were telling me that you're working on Volume 3.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of change it up a little bit from. Well, I guess it's not really changing it up from the paranormal, even though it kind of is. I mean, these are real life cases. I had to be a lot more careful with making sure I got the facts, because when you're dealing with stuff like the black-eyed kids or shadow entities, it's all about perception.
Right.
My experiences, what I perceive, what others have perceived that they've told me. And with this new series, it's factual cases of actual human beings who have gone missing and their families have endured tragedies. And I wanted to make sure I acknowledge that before getting into what I think is happening and going on in these cases, because nobody else seems to want to talk about the paranormal or supernatural, otherworldly angle to these cases for fear of, I guess, offending. And I certainly don't want to offend anyone either, but I do feel like it's time that we start looking in a different direction to bring some closure to these families, or just to maybe understand a little better for ourselves of what's going on out there.
Yeah, I think with some of these cases, especially the ones that are older, I think if I was a family member, this is just my opinion and my view, I would want somebody to come in with a different view and a different way of looking at it that could maybe generate, new leads or because sometimes I think a fresh set of eyes, that's why a lot of times like cold cases are solved when a cold case, unit comes in, who think outside the box and do different things. And so I think looking at it through a paranormal lens at some of these cases that are just so weird that it seems like it's something supernatural, paranormal that's going on, because these people just disappear off the face of the planet with no no explanation, no reason, no rhyme to it. And the evidence that stacks up doesn't make any sense. And so looking at it through the paranormal lens, maybe even if there is a real world explanation, maybe just, what I'm saying, looking at it outside of the box through a different lens may be help to solve some of these as well.
Right. It could bring to light a different clue or a different way of thinking. And that's all I wanted to do, to bring a different lens to a lot of these cases. I mean, some of them are so fantastical that I had to actually check and be like, okay, so this did actually happen, right? This isn't, this isn't a made up story that someone told at some point about a missing person, because they're just, I don't know. I don't know how else to explain it except to say that, most of the ones that I covered, if not all of them, are just so out there as far as like what the evidence is and what it isn't, and what probably happened to these people, children, elderly, middle-aged, all alike, that I just thought it was time. I get very frustrated, and here's how this series came about. I get frustrated when I read other people who've compiled lists of mysterious disappearances, and they stop short of telling you what their ideas are.
Yeah.
They just present the facts and the information, and, that's okay because they're presenting the facts. But at the end of the day, I would get to the end of these books and be like, okay, but what do you think happened? Like, what does this person, what does this author think happened? And there would be no answer, because again, 9.5 times out of 10, the person is afraid of offending the families. And I did struggle with that too, but I thought it was more important to shed a light on these cases than it was to tiptoe around the facts.
Well, I think reading the books, I think a lot of the cases, the people were either into the supernatural, paranormal in some way, shape, or form that they found evidence of in a lot of these cases that you read about. So that I think that's already in there with a lot of these anyway, and a lot of weird things that were surrounding their lives before they went missing. And even some of them that were found, even the way they were found is very mysterious and supernatural, otherworldly. So I think the cases that you picked, a lot of them lend themselves to that anyway. And your mind goes there no matter if you're into the paranormal or not. And so I don't think you kind of went out on a limb and trying to make connections, you know what I'm saying, where there's not any with the paranormal. A lot of them make a lot of sense.
I appreciate that, because I definitely tried not to. I tried to just present the facts as well, just as they were. But there's a paragraph after every case that I just talk about, well, what if this happened, or what if this happened? And sometimes I have several ideas, because I'm not coming into this claiming to know what happened. Right. I really think it's important that we look at what's other in the cases that, very recent ones, but mainly I think I've covered a lot of older ones where the possibility wasn't even there. It would have been taboo for someone to say, was it extraterrestrials? And then I do try to go into why I believe, it could be X, Y, or Z as well, so as not to leave anyone hanging on a thread at the end of the book. But each case is different, I really carefully chose these cases for specific reasons. And I just hope that it opens up the people who are reading the book's minds to the fact that there is a whole other world, many worlds surrounding the one that we live in. We are not all there is. And I think once more people come to that realization and come to acceptance of that, the easier it'll be to solve some of these cases and to be able to point out, without being ridiculed or without having to be fearful of saying it, that sometimes it is extraterrestrials, and sometimes it is cryptozoological, and sometimes, it is, I don't even know, otherworldly beings, interdimensionals.
Yeah. And even, we even hear stories of, people who have gone into time slips and were fortunately able to get out of them. But these people, there's still a lot of stories out there like that. And maybe some of these people went into a time slip and couldn't get out, but you have people that have come back from things like that. And then of course we have all the stories of people having encounters with UFOs and otherworldly beings, maybe interdimensional beings, or even cryptids, like you're saying. So I'm with you. Why couldn't some of these explanations be why some of these people are missing?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure because I cover a lot of cases, but I think I've actually covered not many, but maybe a handful or a little less of people who have come back and who have had, some stories to tell about what they saw, or they have like fuzzy memories, which is reminiscent to me of people who have been abducted and their memories were screened or blocked. So I think the people reading these new books are going to be able to understand where I was coming from, not only from the paranormal community, but I think the people from the paranormal community are going to understand what I was trying to do here, because I do include some cases where people, one guy put his foot through this there was just a fuzzy looking something in the atmosphere, and he went and stuck his foot in it and his foot disappeared, and he took his foot back out and turned and went running the other way because he was like, heck no. So what if someone wasn't paying attention and was looking for a deer or something and walked through that? Well, their whole body would disappear, right? So why is that not happening? It could be. And you hit it right on the head. Exactly.
Well, I've even been to a couple of paranormal locations to investigate that we've been told if you're out on the grounds, like on the property, investigating at night, you see like shimmering looking air, like steer clear of it. Like we don't know exactly what it is, but people have seen it and they don't want you to like disappear somewhere or something, things like that. So I've even been warned by serious investigators who run these places, that something could happen. So it's out there and it sounds far-fetched, but it's really not.
Yeah, it sounds far-fetched until it's you that it's happening to. And a part of me gets a little bit of joy when a person comes back from it and they were a complete and total non-believer and they ended up running into something like, a fey creature or a glimmer man or the portals. Portals come in all shapes, sizes, and they all look different. But a lot of the time they are shimmering air, as you put it. That's actually a great way to put it. That's what they look like. So if you see something like that, guys, whoever's listening in the woods and you don't want to be disappeared, stay far away from it, because it really is true. And I wouldn't even suggest like putting your leg or your arm through it, because there are other beings on the other side of those portals, whether, again, you believe that or not. Just because I don't believe it's going to rain tomorrow doesn't mean that rain doesn't exist and that it's not going to happen. Do you understand?
Right.
So I just caution people to, especially as a medium and seeing the things that I've seen my whole life, I just caution people to be more aware and to try their very best, especially when out in, the woods or out in cautious than they normally would be. Don't go drunk and don't act a fool, I guess, when you're dealing with things like this, because you will pay for it one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can hear the audience saying, just get into the stories already. So let's dive in.
Guys.
Let's dive into some of the stories. Cause they're, like you said, there's plenty of them, with you working on volume 3 now. One of the ones that caught my attention in volume 2, and we're just going to kind of jump around cause we want people to go read the books. So we'll just jump around here to some of these stories. Jerry Irwin is a very interesting story with this guy was in the military. And this story is one of the longer ones because all this stuff happened to this guy that was just insane. That points toward definitely the paranormal, especially something to do with like aliens and things like that. He was a private in the military.
Yeah. So Private First Class Jerry Irwin, and he worked as a Nike missile technician in Fort Bliss, Texas. On the night of February 28th, 1959 is when all of this kind of started happening and coming together for him. He had just had a 1-month leave that he spent in Nampa, Ohio. So he's just driving back to base to report and check in, making sure he gets there on time. And I'm just going to maybe read a paragraph because I think that'd be easier than me trying to explain it. As he drove, he came to a section of southern Utah near a town called Cedar City. Suddenly, there was a bright flash above him in the sky. It was almost blinding, and as he looked up, he saw a brilliant white light traveling across the sky directly in front of him where the flash had just been. So bright and dazzling was this light that it completely illuminated the dark, barren, and desolate landscape that surrounded him. Jerry decided he had to track where it was headed and pulled over to the side of the road until it eventually seemed to disappear behind a ridge somewhere beyond the horizon. The light was very low to the ground, alarmingly so, especially considering Jerry thought that it was, because, his rational brain, he thought that it was a low-flying plane or some other aircraft. And when he watched it fall even lower beyond the ridge, he worried he had possibly just witnessed a plane crash. So Jerry decided to leave behind his car after getting back into it in order to scribble out a quick note to anyone who saw it parked there and came to investigate. The note read, "I've gone to investigate a possible plane crash. Please call law enforcement officers." He left the note in full view of his steering wheel and then took some black shoe polish he had handy in his car and wrote in large letters with it along the sides of the vehicle, "Stop." He then ventured out over and across the aforementioned dark and desolate landscape that surrounded him and walked straight into the unknown. Speaking of what has become known as not only the earliest report of alien abduction, but also one of the strangest in history. Because that's not it, right? And I'm not reading anymore, but that's not it. This was just the beginning of a long journey into the extraterrestrial world for him.
Yeah.
So, to sum it up, someone did find the car. They did call the Cedar City Sheriff's Office. They responded very quickly. At first, they couldn't find him, but then they found him. They found no evidence of any plane crash. And they rushed him. They found him unconscious near some, in the middle of the desert, kind of where he had parked his car. They rushed him to the hospital, but he was unresponsive to any and all efforts. It was like something had knocked him out, where even like their usual methods, smelling salts, whatever they would use, would not wake him up. They just had to leave him and wait for him to wake up on his own. So that to me is like the first really strange thing about his condition, right? Because he could not be brought out of whatever this was. The nurses were actually joking while he was there sleeping, because he was talking in his sleep and saying things like "jacket on bush" and like very strange, but very specific things that didn't make sense to them, but that would kind of make sense later on through the story. And when he did wake up the following morning, he finally did, he was panicked, still thinking that he was looking for a plane crash. So there was no memory of, whatever it was that had happened to Jerry. This is a really long story. Basically, in summation, he was released from the hospital. He was assured he would be fine. They found nothing physically, mentally wrong with him at all. But he kept having these fainting spells immediately after that he had never had before. So this came on as a result of whatever it was that happened to him in the desert. It happened for like the third time. He was walking down a street in El Paso. He was off duty. But again, when someone found him and he was brought to the hospital, he was in a deep sleep that he could not be revived. He tried everything, they couldn't pull him out of it. He woke up in a panic, wondering if there were any survivors of a plane crash. So he not only lost like the original amount of time that he was out there that night, but he lost what had happened to him since the last time he had woken up in the hospital as well, when he had just gone back to duty and was doing his regular thing. He thought the date was still February 28th and had no recollection of the medical staff whom he had just spent like a week with a couple of weeks earlier. Didn't know who they were, but eventually after another week or two, he was released with a clean bill of health from the doctors and medical staff at that hospital. And everything on the outside seemed to be, business as usual, back to normal with Jerry Irwin, but his mind was kind of messed up now. He kept feeling compelled to return to the spot where he had originally passed out the first time, meaning in the desert when he was looking for the plane crash on the first night.
Yeah.
Okay. And he had no reason to want to go there. One day, the urgent need to return was so overwhelming that he left his post on base while there. Like he went AWOL and started wandering around the area where this bizarre odyssey seemingly started in the first place. He was just kept being drawn back there. Now, how anyone who's listening to this or who read this story at this point isn't thinking extraterrestrial is beyond me. I forget there are people who don't believe in that sort of thing, and I guess I understand that, but you know, I can't imagine what else could be going on here. So he was just kind of wandering around at that point. He did actually find his jacket that he had been missing. If you remember, he woke up saying jacket on bush and like muttering all these things while sleeping. And he found his jacket. It was on top of a bush, which is why he was probably saying jacket on bush in his sleep. And there was a pencil with a note. And this is the most frustrating for me. There was a pencil with a note attached to it, jammed into one of the buttonholes of the jacket. But Jerry was overwhelmed by an urge to burn the note instead of reading it. And he did burn it. He didn't even glance at what was written on it. So to me, I'm like, man, I wish he would have just read what was written on that note. And it probably would, maybe it wouldn't, but I think that it might explain like a little bit of what all this was. But
yeah,
I feel like he was definitely mind controlled to burn that.
Yeah, the fact that he kept having those episodes where he just pass out and they couldn't explain it at all. And eventually he just disappeared.
Yeah, there's a lot more to the story. I wasn't sure like where to end, but I know we have a lot to cover. But yes, he did eventually disappear. There's a researcher that wrote a book, and I give the name of the book in my book, where he claims to have found Jerry Irwin and that he's alive and well, or that at least he was at the time this book was written. I don't believe that for 1 minute. He showed no proof that Irwin was alive. And, you know, there's no evidence to suggest that Jerry Irwin is on this earth right now. And I do believe he was eventually abducted. And I believe that he was taken to another planet or another dimension, because extraterrestrials, sometimes I refer to them as well as interdimensionals because they're kind of one and the same sometimes. He was taken somewhere other, and he's probably, you know, even though he was in his 30s and 40s in 1959, I do believe he could still be alive out there in another galaxy somewhere or in another dimension somewhere. And he was picked for whatever reason, either because he was the one that saw the light that night, which I don't really believe. I believe there was something special about him that these ETs saw, just like with all the other victims and all the other cases. There's something in them, either DNA wise or just with their personality, with their aura, whatever it is. These people are being chosen for a reason.
Yeah. And so many different, and the crazy thing about these cases is they're so many different environments. So like, you know, we've talked about, I've talked about with you and with Steve Stockton, you know, about the missing persons in parks and things. And those are a lot of the same criteria, you know, like David Pilates stuff and the same, criteria, but all of these stories, a lot of them are just different environments and different circumstances and things like that don't really match up with some of those same criteria. One of the ones that's always caught my attention, which this one actually is a national park, that I've just found this weird, is Karen Sykes. She was an experienced hiker and all that, and her and her boyfriend were hiking, and she kind of went around a corner and just disappeared into thin air.
Yep, I purposely did that as far as them. I didn't want to just cover the missing in the woods. I have a series of books, well, there's 2 right now, called Campfire Stories, which are my reader and subscribers. They sent in their own encounters with things in the woods, you know, whatever those things might have been. But I wanted to show people that I think the missing in the woods thing has become very well known even to people outside of the community. And I wanted people to understand that this is not just happening in the woods to, you know, German athletes. This is happening all over the place. It's happening on city blocks. It's happening. It doesn't matter. And I'll get more into that in volume 3. When that comes out, I'm going to be covering, you know, some of them that happen more in the city. But Karen Sykes was one I just kind of stumbled across while researching for this book. And she is not the only person who has turned a corner and disappeared into the clear blue sky. Despite, wasn't she, I'm just trying to go by memory now, but wasn't she kind of like, oh, she was an expert hiking and climber, and she knew the trail specifically where she was with her partner or her friend in Mount Rainier specifically. So she was in an area that she had been on or in so many other times, hiking trails that she had hiked hundreds of other times. And this happened in 2018. So this is not an older case. This is something new. And I did those cases to show people like this has been happening since the dawn of time, basically. And it's happening right up to this very day.
Yeah. 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 And they did finally find her body, but it was way far away from where she disappeared. And, the person that she was with never heard anything, no screams, no nothing. And she was, supposed to just go around the corner and come right back because she was just scouting up the trail, and she was going to be writing an article. And this was a well-worn trail that lots of people hike on. It's not like they were off the beaten path. But yeah, they found her 3 days later, and she was up some rugged terrain way far off the trail. And they found no injuries on her, and they just concluded she died from, a heart condition and hypothermia and kind of just, exposure, I guess. But that case I always found interesting because it is one of those where she just walked around the corner and poof, she's gone. And then why did they find her up?
Yeah, I mean,
5,000 feet up a mountain, it is insane.
Especially when the search started almost right away. Like the person she was with looked for her or called for her, but not for long before calling the authorities in. What happened? She made it all the way up this very treacherous, very steep ridge, very far up, just to what? To die mysteriously. And this is I think this is the case where I start talking about something that I've discussed with my spirit guides and my team about this new earth that is being developed in a dimension that's similar to ours. And if you guys want to hear more about that, you'll have to get the book. But I do think they're running experiments on certain types of human beings. And I think they're running experiments on human beings who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, too. There is no one thing. And that's why these cases they're happening everywhere, all over the place, because I didn't want to stick to just one place. I wanted the wider community and even the people outside of it to understand that this can literally happen when you walk out your front door in the suburbs. It doesn't matter. And it's not only happening at night or at dawn. It's happening all hours of the day and night. Sometimes people are coming back, sometimes they're not. But when they come back, they either have nothing to say because they can't remember, or they have a lot of strange things to say where people are like, oh, they're just exhausted. They can't think straight right now. I want to hear what they have to say. I don't want to hear they're exhausted. I want to hear all about it because I believe them.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the cases? I mean, that's a few that stuck out in my mind that I find fascinating. What are some of the cases that stick out for you?
So the very first story in the very first book that I talked about was one that has kind of haunted me ever since I came across this story years ago. But there wasn't enough information for me to do a whole video about it on my channel because my videos range from 30 to 40 minutes. And it's pretty straight and to the point. It's Eric Lewis. It happened in 2010. He was mountain climbing at Mount Rainier, which is in Washington State, the same place where Kathy Sykes had gone missing. He was with two men, his climbing companions, a guy named Don and a guy named Trevor. So Don was the leader. They were climbing the side of the mountain. The leader was Don, so he was up front. Then Trevor. Then Eric was at the bottom of the rope. They looked back to check on him. They were at about 13,900 feet up the side of the mountain. They were experienced climbers. This wasn't like a one-off for them. They knew what they were doing. They were well prepared. Don and Trevor had looked down. They saw Eric. Eric gave them the thumbs up. And about 2 seconds later, they decided to kind of swing into a little cubby hole on the side of the mountain because the wind was getting a lot and they wanted to regroup. There was snow on the ground. But when they looked down to make sure that was good with Eric, and this was literally 2 seconds after they had just looked down and he had given them the thumbs up, Eric was gone. He was not there. Now they're hanging 13,900 feet up the side of a mountain. So you'd think, okay, he fell, right? Maybe something happened where he fell.
Right.
They never found his body. They never found any footprints. Now they did find his backpack at, I believe it was a few hundred feet lower than where they were. Like he maybe had swung into a little cubby because something had happened with him, but they didn't find any of his footprints there, and they would have because there was fresh snow. They found his backpack and his climbing gear. They never found his body either right below where they were or anywhere else. And he kind of just disappeared literally into thin air. Eric's backpack, climbing harness, and a snow shovel were found in a snow cave at an altitude of 13,600 feet. But there were never any more clues as to what happened to him, what became of him, and there are no leads in this case at all. To this day, he's still missing. I mentioned him in my first book, Missing the Faith Theory, because I believe that it's possible that some pixie fairies or some similar type of flying small fairy were messing with him to the point where they kind of unclipped him and took him with. Here's the thing. There was no tug on the rope.
Yeah.
So the other two guys, Eric and Trevor, didn't feel him cut himself free. They didn't even feel that there was, however much he weighed, less weight on the rope. They didn't feel a tug. They didn't feel a swing. They felt nothing abnormal or out of the ordinary. So something had to have happened to take that feeling away from them. You're going to notice when maybe 200, 250 pound solid guy falls from the bottom of your rope. There's going to be a difference there, but there just wasn't. So I do feel something supernatural happened here, which stopped them from realizing that he was gone. And that one really has always gotten to me because I just can't imagine what could have happened to this guy.
Well, even on like Mount Everest, which is, way bigger than Mount Rainier and way more treacherous conditions, they know where all the bodies are, of the people who have died up there.
Yeah.
Even if they've gone missing, when there's a thaw that happens, they, other climbers find the bodies and they actually use them. And as morbid as this is, they don't bring them down from the mountain because it's more dangerous to bring the bodies down. But a lot of the climbers now use them as markers to see how far they've gotten, up the mountain when they're climbing. And so, there's hundreds of bodies on Everest, and they've identified, I think, all of them. They know who they all are. So it's interesting that Mount Rainier, which is not as dangerous, not as tall, not saying it's not dangerous to mountain climb, but, this guy just disappears into thin air. You think that would happen somewhere like Mount Everest, where you have the big caverns and things that open up, and Mount Rainier, you got a lot more people climbing it because it's a lot easier in air quotes to climb that mountain than Mount Everest. And so, you figure they would at least find something else other than, his backpack and stuff. And also, if he would have fallen into like a crevice or something, why did they find his backpack in this ice cave, and his stuff? That stuff would have went with him.
Yes.
Yeah.
That made it even stranger for me. It was like wherever he was going, they were like, no, you got to leave your stuff here. Do you know what I'm saying? Or the stuff was put there. One other one that I was hoping to talk about is Matthew Pendergrass. Matthew Pendergrass was a gold mine of information from my paranormal author's perspective. It was the year 2000. The world, or at least America, had gone a little crazy with the Y2K stuff for the most part.
Right.
But this guy was about to graduate from Rhodes College in Memphis, and he was like 2 weeks away from graduation. His family was well off financially. His dad was a surgeon. His dad made a ton of money. So according to everyone who knew him, he was well-adjusted. He was happy-go-lucky. He, wasn't into drinking or drugging or anything like that. He was really school-oriented, family-focused. But on December 1st in the year 2000, he left his house where he shared with some roommates to go to Spanish class at the college. I mean, it was something he had done every day that he had Spanish class. He'd never had, it was a very ordinary act. He was last seen leaving his house at 7:30 that morning. He had a navy colored Toyota 4Runner, and he was heading towards campus, and he only lived 4 blocks away from campus. He never made it, and he was never seen or heard from again. When he didn't show up later on, his friends that he lived with started to call started to call family members. All of the calls went unanswered to Matthew. He had spoken with a friend from Atlanta, Georgia, where his family lived. He lived, I guess, in Memphis because he was going to college there, but nobody had heard from him. And the friend who said she spoke to him that morning said that he was perfectly fine. He was just talking to her about how he was going to Spanish class. But it was out of character for him. So he was reported as missing. And the vehicle was found, though, which I was like, oh, okay, cool. But no, not cool, because it was found in Lonoke County, Arkansas. Okay, all the way in another state where he had no business being. He had no known association to Arkansas. The internet in 2000 isn't what it is today, so it'd be very rare, unlikely that he had, formed this secret relationship with someone and like snuck off to Lonoke, Arkansas, in the middle of the woods, by the way, swampland, to meet him. But to make a long story short, because this was another very long one, they found a bunch of what they described as weird poetry and, quote, a rambling stream of consciousness thoughts on the nature of life and death. That's what they were saying, the authorities, what they found. But they found everything was laid out in the open. So his clothes were neatly folded next to where the vehicle was. And this was the middle, again, of the swamp in the woods in Arkansas. Some hunters randomly came across the car. And everything they found in the trunk was like plain as day, except in a hidden compartment in his trunk, they found a journal. And in the journal, he talked about the silver elves. So the silver elves to me are moon elves, and moon elves are traveling fae creatures who will sometimes recruit human beings to travel with them. But they're kind of no nonsense. They're very, very neat, orderly, tidy. They stay in one place. I'm wondering if somehow this college student, that Matthew Pendergrast, connected with the moon elves in some way at some point and decided to go and follow them. Now, his mother said there's no way that he left his clothes there because he was very, very messy and didn't even know how to fold his own clothes. But the moon elves would have known how to fold the clothes because they're, again, a very neat species. They're known to be very neat, tidy, orderly. They're no nonsense, but they are known to have human beings traveling with them in their packs. And I put a lot more information about the silver or moon elves in the book, in this story. But to me, it's pretty cut and dry that he decided to go with them and maybe learn from them. And he might still appear one day with all of this knowledge. That's just my take on it.
Yeah. It's just weird that he went out in the swamp and got naked.
And they never found him. I mean, they dredged the swamp. They were like, did he accidentally maybe get shot? Yeah, but why didn't someone hide the car? Like, if you're going to come forward and say you found his car, they looked into the two hunters that stumbled across it. There were no leads. Why was this journal so hidden?
Yeah.
Right? Because there were other papers that were talking about, like, whatever the cops said, it was like macabre stuff or whatever, and this rambling stream of consciousness. So I wonder, was he messing around with like some drug or something that might have opened his mind a little bit to allow these elves to penetrate? I don't know.
Yeah, and it took them a couple of searches of the car before they ever found this really well hidden journal as well.
It was well hidden, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that story is really weird and interesting, especially since he was writing about those. And what compelled him that day, instead of another day, to just go off to Arkansas, when he was, like, for all intents and purposes, completely normal that day from people talking to him. He was going to Spanish class and wasn't one to, like, miss class or anything. And, just an odd case. And
it's like they turned his brain on or something. I have a feeling that perhaps he had, because the way the moon elves come to a lot is if you're experimenting with LSD. I'm not saying Matthew was, I'm just speculating here that maybe they had encountered him at another time, and it was time, that random day in December of 2000, for him to be able to go with them. So people were like, did he pick up a hitchhiker? Was he carjacked? Okay, even if he was, what was he doing in Lonoke County, Arkansas? So there was a psychic who worked for, I guess, the Lanoke County Sheriffs. The only thing I could find was that she worked for Lanoke County. So I'm assuming that means the law enforcement, because some law enforcement does work closely with psychics. Her name's Carol Pate, and she said that she believed that Matthew wanted and was attempting to, quote, be reborn as a silver elf, end quote, in some kind of strange and misguided like fantasy, right? She also said something that was so profound to me. She said, quote, I believe that he felt that he was in a battle for his soul, that he was battling demons and he lost, end quote. But he never mentioned any of this to anyone. So who knows if she's correct or not, right? She's psychic, not a medium. So I know that works a little bit differently.
Yeah. That case is very fascinating. And there's a lot more detail, like you said in the book. People go read the story. Another one that really caught my attention that I just think is interesting and is a completely different environment than what we've been talking about, but Brian Schaefer.
Oh my gosh. I know that case like the back of my hand.
Yeah, there's video of him going into this bar, but never coming out, and he just disappeared. Yes.
He went into the Lazy Tuna Saloona. Or the Ugly Tuna Saloona, sorry. And that was in April of 2006. He was a second-year medical student at Ohio State University of Medicine. He enjoyed everything about college life. I mean, he was just a really popular, well-liked, well-spoken, well-bred young man. He was about to propose to his longtime girlfriend, Alexis. Everyone, like, he was just doing so well. The only thing in his life that, you know, he was struggling with was he had recently lost his mom, who he was very, very close with, a self-proclaimed mama's boy, to a form of cancer, some sort of cancer, earlier, I guess in March or February of that same year. But people said he was pulling through. He wasn't like completely depressed. He would just get upset about his mom sometimes. So on March 31st, 2006, it was the height of spring break. And it was Friday night. So he decided to go out to dinner with his dad because he was very, you know, family oriented, very, you know, he's just a good kid, right?
Yeah.
He was going out with his friend William after having the dinner with his dad. They met up at the Ugly Tuna Saloona. The main thing I want everyone to take from this, because this is one that I did have more information than usual on again. So if you want to just grab the book, this is in Gone Volume 2. So like you said, he was seen going in. He was seen into the bar. He was seen on camera several different times throughout the night. Now, he told his friends he had to use the bathroom. He was seen getting up and walking towards the bathroom. He was never seen again. He was not seen on any of the massive surveillance that was outside of this bar, all up and down the street. This is a college town. There are cameras, especially nowadays, but even back in 2006, they were everywhere. He was never seen going out any of the exits, including there. Some people say he went out maybe the construction exit because they were renovating a certain area. They searched, you know, high and low for this kid, and they just never found him. He literally disappeared into thin air. And for me, I have to really stop myself, because a lot of the time in cases like this, okay, I immediately think, where did they go? They went up. Right? Like, where do you go? You just go up when no one's looking. But I'm wondering, with the college age kids that are all disappearing and ending up in water sources, but they haven't been, you know, deceased as long as they've been in the water. You guys know what I'm talking about. David Paulides wrote a book about it. Was this a part of that? I really don't know. Did he meet someone or something in the bathroom that did something to him? And I'm not saying this as like a human being. I'm talking about, you know, one of the extraterrestrial races that live among us, or some kind of dark spirit that, you know, again, it sounds very fantastical, guys, but you have to understand, in my world of the things that I see every day, this is pretty normal, average stuff. That this kid, this bright young man who was going to contribute a lot to the good in the world, in the light of the world, being a doctor, a med student, saving the life of human beings, that he would be accosted by something possibly demonic or lower vibrational, something much darker that did not want him doing this.
Yeah.
And took him.
Yeah, it's just because there was so much surveillance of this bar, and even on the street. And to just, to see him on the video, and they definitely had the entrances covered and the exits, and no trace of him. Even the police are just throwing their hands up like, what the hell? You know, like, how do you go into a bar? Yeah, and disappear.
Yep. They are adamant that, people were saying, well, maybe he did leave, but the police missed him. The police said they are adamant that they don't know what in the world happened and they can't explain it, but they said, we have searched every single square inch, every single second of frame from the time he walked into that bar until the next morning. He did not leave. And they even they picked through every dumpster within like a 6-block radius. They brought in sniffer dogs. He didn't show up on a single frame of footage over multiple cameras, not to mention he wasn't like in the background of anyone's pictures either, right? So,
right.
You take a picture, you catch people in the background.
Yeah.
It's like after he said he was going to the bathroom, he was gone. And I'm sorry, but I don't think someone did this like some sort of ninja-like evasion tactic that they managed to carry him out somehow without ever being seen or found out. It's more unlikely to me than something paranormal, otherworldly happening to him that a human being was the cause of this. I just don't believe for a second a human being had something to do with this disappearance. Yeah. And this is one that I can say that I am adamant that this was not done by a human being.
Especially in today's society with all the cameras and like you're saying, with people taking photos and all that stuff, for somebody to just disappear in thin air, especially in, downtown in a bar somewhere, it's just crazy. I know like Nashville.
So many people.
Yeah. Like Nashville, we just had that case with Riley Strain. And they finally found his body in the water 8 days later, but all these cameras and he still was missing for 8 days. And there's still questions around that. We were talking about that. I was kind of catching up on that before we were recording, but he was found missing his cowboy boots, his pants, and his underwear. He only had a shirt on. And my question is, we all know if you wear cowboy boots, you know how hard they are to put on and take off. And the Cumberland River it has a current, but it's not something that would pull your boots off. And they found they just found his debit card by itself on the bank of the river as well. And so it's a weird disappearance. And of course they're calling it a accidental drowning. But he only had one drink at the bar and then drank 2 waters, and then they kicked him out because they found he was too drunk. So that's a little suspicious, but they didn't find, from the autopsy report, I don't think they found that he was even drunk, but they didn't find any other drugs in his system either. So
there are a lot of cases that I've come across like that. And that's kind of a reoccurring theme in the sobering coincidence stuff, right? That Dave Paulides talked about, where the college kids do go missing. They've had a drink or 2.
Yeah.
And they're so inebriated. You see them stumbling, banging into people. I do feel like, and there's a smiley face killer element of it. Brian Schaefer is a lot of the times included in the smiley face killer. Listen, guys, this has been going on as far as the smiley face killer since the internet started, because they believe it's a group of people on the dark web who got together and decided to murder. Okay. But that can't possibly be what's happening, because it's been going on for so long now that there would have been one shred of evidence, one tiny clue. And to me, I can't think of any names of cases off the top of my head, but there's a lot of times in these quote unquote accidental drownings where the person, the young man that was, and it's always a young man. I've looked for women dying in the same way or being victims of the same circumstances. I actually recently found one that I'm going to be talking about in my channel. But anyway, so they're deceased for 5 days. The autopsy shows they're deceased for 5 days. Well, they've been missing for 30 days, or they've been in the water, for 5 days. They've been missing for 30.
Right.
No one wants to talk about what could have possibly happened that other 25 days. And this happened way more than once or twice.
Yeah. And the similarities with the ages and college kids and college guys and all that is crazy.
It's always the young men.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's always weird stuff surrounding it. But and for your third book, you're working on it now. Is there any stories that you can kind of share with us, kind of a sneak peek to the third one?
Yeah, just if you can give me 1 second. Okay, Stacey Harris. So this happened in July of 1981. She was 14 years old. She went with her father and a group of 10 other people on a riding trip to Yosemite National Park. It was July 25th. They were going to be out there for about 4 days. So they get there. Her legs are kind of tired because they rode horses or camels, depending on which source you abide by, up the mountain. They were riding all day. So she got into one of the cabins that they had rented. She was there with her dad. She took a shower. She said, you know what? I'm just going to walk down one of the trails and take some photos. She really liked taking pictures. During her walk, she ran into a guy named Gerald Stewart. He was an elderly member. He was like 70 years old. He walked a little bit with her down the trail, but then he got really tired. So he sat there and was watching her. She was standing on top of a rock, taking pictures overlooking this small lake. He turned around to look at someone who was way behind, who had called to something similar. And when he turned back around, so this was a 2-second turnaround, she was gone. The only thing they ever found was the lens of her camera.
Wow.
She disappeared right in front of at least 2 witnesses within 2 seconds.
Yeah, that makes me not want to go in the woods. I mean, stories like that.
And yeah, one other thing crazy about Stacy's case is Dave Paulides, he would get, he gets tons of FOIAs. We all do when we're doing this kind of work, and we're entitled to it as the public, right?
Right.
To the Freedom of Information Act to get the case files. He was told in this case, you will never, ever get that case file. And when he asked why, the guy was like, because you won't.
Wow. And
Stacy is not listed as a missing person on any database. She's now on the Charlie Project. But as far as NCMEC, she was not, because at the time in 1981, the national parks did not have to report missing people. So they not only don't have her listed as missing in a national park, they are refusing to give out the Freedom of Information Act paperwork on her case. There's something here that we are missing, that a lot of people higher up perhaps know about that happened to Stacy. And I believe it's something similar to, why the Green Berets show up for a missing 2-year-old. And they're there to quote unquote help with the search. And this has happened more times than I can count. Yet everyone has to stay away from the areas in which they're searching and can't communicate with them in any way.
Right. Or the FBI showing up and taking over the case when they don't do missing persons unless it crosses state borders, and they can prove that somebody's kidnapped or something. That's when the FBI gets involved, but not in a national park. But they show up in a lot of these cases, and I've even heard stories about.
This is one of those cases.
Yeah, and I've heard stories about even some of those in Canada, where the Canadian government has showed up for missing persons with like special forces with AR-15s and all this Kevlar and stuff on to go through the woods looking for a missing person. Well, why would you need all of that tactical gear unless you know something we don't?
Yeah, and if you're there to help with the search, shouldn't you be coordinating with the other searchers?
Right.
Shouldn't you be speaking to the lead investigators on the case? It's like, no. Now, I'm not saying this did happen in Stacy's case, but it was very reminiscent to me of those times when they do come in and just totally overtake the case for like a day, and then everything's back to business as usual as they watch everyone search, when I believe they actually know what's going on.
Yeah, and there's some cases where they've even kicked the search and rescue out of the woods and won't let them back in.
Yes,
and things like that are just weird, and no explanation, no nothing to the family, to anybody.
Yep. And it hasn't happened again. Like, it doesn't happen. And that's the thing. It doesn't happen enough that like the general public would be aware of it.
Right.
But it happens enough that if you're researching, you'll see it coming up time and time again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just weird, strange things in this world that we can't explain.
Yeah. Even with all the weird, strange things that I deal with on a day-to-day daily basis, it's still strange to me. And that this is one of the reasons I barely leave my house, let alone go into the woods. Yeah. I am fearful. I am, because this is happening to your average regular person, and me being as connected and as sensitive as I am, I'm terrified. I really am. And I caution people in my books to, I'm not trying to put fear in people's hearts. Go out, explore, connect with nature, but make sure you know the area where you're going. Make sure you know the legends of that area. It sounds ridiculous, but you should know the legends of the area in which you're going into, and maybe bring, a little offering in case you do run into something like some tobacco or a little airplane bottle of liquor or something.
Yeah. And I always tell my listeners, this is why I don't camp. This is exactly why I don't camp.
Yeah.
No, that little thin layer of fabric between you and the outside world in that tent is not enough to protect you. Not just from things that you can't see or that we don't understand, but I mean, even bears and mountain lions and things, that's not going to protect you from anything. So yeah, I'm not a camper and never will be.
I've never been.
Yeah. I will glamp. You got a cabin for me to stay in or something. I'm fine with that, but I'm not going off exploring. Oh my God, I
can't believe you just said that. Last week I was talking about camping and I was like, I don't camp, guys, but I would be more than willing to go glamping. Like, I'm totally in for the glamping. The Pine Barrens here in New Jersey. It's about 2 hours away from me, not that far, but almost, where they have these small cabins. And I figured if we get one cabin for the males, one cabin for the females, everybody chips in, and whoever wants to come can just come, and we can look for the Jersey Devil, and I can do a spirit call, and we could, live stream some of it, and I put videos together. So I've been trying to do that for a couple years now. I can never seem to find the right time, but I think this year or definitely next year, I'm going to get it together and we're going to do that. So that'll be my first taste of camping, but it'll be inside of a cabin at least,
Yeah, a little more protected. Yeah. And I've got something in the works for this fall where I'm gonna go out in the woods, maybe not camping, but I'm going out in the woods for a documentary project. But people,
awesome.
Yeah, everybody will find out more about that later with the Strange and Haunted documentary stuff. But these books are fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on, Gemma, and talking about them today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the support, and it's always a good time talking with you. I really enjoy doing these interviews with you, and thank you so much.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you on. All right, everybody, y'all go check out Gemma's books. I will have the links in the show notes as usual, and look for Volume 3 come out very soon, and we will see you next time. Y'all stay safe out there. Have a good day. Thank you for listening to The Unseen Paranormal. Join me next Wednesday with a brand new guest, and please rate, review, share, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. This helps more people discover the show. You can connect with me over on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or join us in the Unseen Paranormal Lounge group on Facebook. Until next time, remember, some of the scariest things are unseen. You have come to the end of the line.